Okay, Faster, I'm start now.
Yes.
恭敬大德圣地，为知法会济一切众生，经转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生脱世离苦得乐。殊真无生。Feel the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion for the sake of this assembly and all living beings. Please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to live suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death and quickly realize non-birth. Amitabha.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchetoye alahati sanmiao sanputo che. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it, and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Rebel Master, and all good knowing advisors. Welcome back to our exploration of the Dharma through the lens of the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra. This week is class number 85. We are going to continue. This is probably the last class that we are going to have on the topic of the heaven of the 33, or the Triumph Trimsha heaven. So I have a few slides to cover. And but before we get to that, let's recite Medicine Master Buddha's name 7 times. Hold on, let me see. Namo, quelling disasters, lengthening life, medicine master, Buddha. 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 Medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one. Okay, let me get today's slides out. Okay. Okay, so last week we had a break, so we didn't have a class. But 2 weeks ago, the last time we all met online, we ended the class by looking at the Buddha cautioning us if we want to put an end to suffering. He said, you won't find it in the mind that does all the false thinking. So you won't find it in the false thinking mind. And that was one of the sutras called that was related to, let me see what sutra, the Lokachinta Sutta. I believe in Sanskrit, Loka Chinta might actually mean love of the world, because in the Malay language, which is based off of Sanskrit, Loka means the world, and Cinta means love or being fond of. So, but I'm not sure if that's the true meaning of the Sanskrit words. But anyway, it's called the Loka Cinta Sutra, and the Buddha spoke about how the false thinking mind, the mind that we are using right now, our sixth consciousness, is not the mind that will, no matter how deep you go into this mind will not help you end birth and death. So basically, your practice has to be internal. No, let me see. Yeah, you don't search outside, you search inside. So you have to go beyond the mind. Okay, that may not have been said very well because I wasn't prepared to say that. But anyway, so we're looking at false thinking, and where the false thinking, no matter how deep you go, will not solve the problem of birth and death. And the Buddha gave the example of the man sitting by the side of the pond, and he saw the Asura army disappearing into a flower, and he thought it was going mad. And that's to point out that even though you may, how you say, explore the world to its end using whatever ability you have right now, because the world system is so large and there are so many different planes of existence and things going on, magical things too, that there's always bound to be something beyond your ability to understand, like what happened for the poor man. Yeah. So today we will look at um, so the Buddha said the false thinking mind is not the way out of suffering. So what is the way out of suffering? So I want to introduce you to the Noble Eightfold Path as discussed in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. And in this sutra, is a pretty long sutra. So we only have a very short excerpt, like maybe, I think this is like 1% or less. But in this section is very important. And it starts this way. It says, thereupon the Blessed One entered the hall of audience, and taking the seat prepared for him, he exhorted the bhikkhus, saying, Now, O bhikkhus, I say to you that these teachings of which I have direct knowledge and which I have made known to you. Buddha says he has direct knowledge, meaning he has experienced it for himself. He knows that it is true. It's not a theory that's developed by him, but it is based on the Buddha's observation of the world that we live in. Yeah. So it says, this you should thoroughly learn, cultivate, develop, and frequently practice, that the life of purity may be established and may long endure, for the welfare and happiness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, well-being, and happiness of gods and men. So what way is this? Buddha said. And what bhikkhus are these teachings? So the Buddha is asking the question on their behalf. He says, they are the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 constitutions of psychic power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay. For any of you who recites the Amitabha Sutra, the short Amitabha Sutra that is recited in our monasteries, let me see, is it every day? No, we recite it once every 2 days. We alternate in our evening ceremony. One day we recite Amitabha Sutra, and the following day we recite the repentance of the 88 Buddha Sutra. But I know some of you recite the Amitabha Sutra at home. If you have recited that, this passage might seem familiar because this refers to what is known as the wings to awakening, or the limbs of enlightenment, where it is the Buddha's own list of his most important teachings. So everything the Buddha taught can, everything the Buddha taught in the Theravada Sutras can be classified under the 37 wings of awakening. And in the Amitabha Sutra, the passage where it appears is this. It says, moreover, Sariputra, in this country, there are always rare and wonderful, very colored birds, white geese, peacocks, parrots, egrets, kalavinkas, and two-headed birds. Okay, I hope that sounds familiar. And then the Buddha says, in the 6 periods of the day and night, the flocks of birds sing forth harmonious and elegant sounds. Their clear and joyful sounds proclaim the 5 roots, the 5 powers, the 7 bodhis shares, the 8 sagely way shares, and dharmas such as this. So the Buddha doesn't even list out the full 37. He just say, and such as this, etc., etc. Why? Because, Amitabha Sutra is a Mahayana sutra. And it says, when living beings of this land hear these sounds, they're altogether mindful of the Buddha, mindful of the Dharma, and mindful of the Sangha. So guess what? When you get to the pure land, what Dharma do you hear? The 37 beings of enlightenment. So in this sutra, the Mahaparidimana Sutra that you see on the screen in front of you, which is also the last sutra that the Buddha spoke before he entered Nirvana, he is reminding the monks that the way out of suffering is through this, through the 37 wings of enlightenment. And then, okay, which is what you're going to hear when you get to the Pure Land, all right? Which makes up the Theravada teachings. Okay. And then the Buddha explains more. He says, these bhikkhus are the teachings of which I have direct knowledge, which I have made known to you, and which you should thoroughly learn, cultivate, develop, and frequently practice, that the life of purity may be established and may long endure for the welfare and happiness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, well-being, and happiness of gods and men. Okay, so included in this, I'm going to jump back one slide, is, if you look at the last line, the Noble Eightfold Path. All right, so the Noble Eightfold Path is included in this. And now we go to the slide that we are supposed to be. Okay, so in this sutra, if you heard the term the lion's roar, sometimes when the Buddha says something important, it is called the lion's roar. So in this sutra, the lion's roar is this. It says, and then the Blessed One spoke, saying, in whatsoever dharma and discipline, Subhadha, there is not found the Noble Eightfold Path, neither is there found a true ascetic of the first, second, third, of or fourth degree of saintliness. Saintliness here means arhatship. But in whatsoever dharma and discipline there is found the Noble Eightfold Path, there is found a true ascetic of the first, second, third, and fourth degrees of saintliness. So why is the Buddha saying this, and who is Subhadha? Well, Subhadha was a wandering ascetic, and he wanted to ask the Buddha for advice because Subhadha was looking for a way out, and he had visited many teachers during that time, and all the teachers had different theories. So I guess maybe Subhadha had not committed himself yet to one particular teaching, and so he went to see the Buddha, and I believe this is the last person the Buddha gave a teaching to. I might be wrong, but certainly one of the last that the Buddha spoke to. So he asked the Buddha, how would he know? He says, in any of those teachings, are there anyone who has ended birth and death? So the Buddha gave the answer. He says that first you need the Noble Eightfold Path. If there exists the Noble Eightfold Path, then you will find arhats, either first stage arhat, second, third, or fourth. Okay. And the Buddha further told Subhadha, he said, now in this Dharma and discipline, Subhadha, which means the Dharma that we have from the Buddha, is found the Noble Eightfold Path. and in it alone are also found true ascetics of the first, second, third, and fourth degrees of arhatship. Devoid of true ascetics are the systems of other teachers. But if Subhadra the bhikkhus live righteously, the world will not be destitute of arhats. So, which means that in any dharma door that you practice, okay, there needs to be the Noble Eightfold Path for you to be really walking the path, and for whatever you do um, to be fruitful. If not, then a lot of things that we do just brings us back to rebirth, because it is still connected to the false thinking mind. So the Noble Eightfold Path is really, really important, and which is why maybe in a few months we'll have a new series of, I wouldn't call it classes because it's not me doing the teaching, uh, but I would say it would be maybe a discussion-based style approach, like how I hear Shufu used to do, where we will get people's opinions. But the aim is to investigate the Pure Land Dharma door through the lens of the Noble Eightfold Path, which means right view, right understanding, right intention, or right vows, right concentration, like how do you recite, how do you get to the point where you can recite Amitabha's name single-mindedly, for example. So I think the Noble Eightfold Path would be an excellent way to truly investigate what the Pure Land Dharma door is all about, and answer a lot of the questions that people might have, conceptions and misconceptions of the Pure Land Dharma door. Okay, now we come to the relationship between Lord Shakra, who is king of the Triumph heaven, and the Buddha, because there are some very interesting, how you say, uh, uh, Lord Shakra has been there with the Buddha for a very long time, and we'll find out. Okay, so this is from the Lalitavistara Sutra, or otherwise known as the Play in Full. This part of the sutra, it says, monks, since 6 years have passed, I had this thought, my saffron robes have really aged. Perhaps it would be good if I could find some cloth to cover me. Okay, so what's the context for this? At this time, the Buddha hasn't become the Buddha yet. He is still a monk, a renunciant, who has left the palace, but he hasn't become enlightened, at least not in the traditional, he hasn't become the Buddha yet. And 6 years have passed. So 6 years have passed, and the Buddha has been wearing the same robes, and he thinks to himself, maybe it's time for a change, because when he says I could find some cloth to cover me, it probably means that his robes are too torn and too ragged to be suitable anymore. Then the Buddha, and this is coming from the Buddha because this is taken directly from the sutra. Buddha says, monks, at that point, one of Sujata's servants, a woman named Radha, had just died. She had been wrapped in a hemp cloth excuse me, and left in the charnel ground. When I saw this dusty rag, I decided to use it to cover myself. So that's an ascetic practice where for monks, if they choose to follow, they don't use new cloth to make their robes, but they pick up robes that have a cloth that has been discarded. So if you're a monk and you practice this Tathagata practice, then your robe is made of cloth that you pick up from the roadside, or in this case of the Buddha, from a funeral ground where where the cloth has been used to wrap a body, and then you take wood from I think, let me see, what tree is it? If I remember correctly, it is the jackfruit tree. You take wood chips from the jackfruit tree, you boil it, you chop it up, you boil it, and then it becomes a natural dye, which will stain the cloth a brown color. And then you sew the cloth into your robes. And that's how a monk in the Tathagata practice gets his robes. Okay. So, okay. Another context Sujata. Who is Sujata? Sujata was the girl who offered the mendicant, the soon-to-be Buddha, the meal of rice porridge, um, uh, which gave the Buddha back his strength and enabled him to meditate and become the Buddha. So that's Sujata's role. So going on, the Buddha said, as I stood there, bent over with my left leg stretched out and my right hand reaching down in order to pick up the rag, one earth god called out to the sky gods, friends, here is a descendant of a great royal clan. He has abandoned his kingdom of a universal monarch, and now he turns his mind to a dusty rag. What a sight, friends. This is really amazing. So one of the earth spirits saw the Buddha, what the future Buddha was going to do, and he spread the news to his Deva brothers in the heavens. And let me see, I was going to explain something here. It says he has abandoned his kingdom of a universal monarch, which means that the prince had a choice. He could put down everything and become the Buddha, or strive to end birth and death, or he could have chosen, if he had chosen to take over his father's throne, then he would have ended up being a world-turning king, a universal monarch, where he would have ruled not just over the continent of Jambudvipa, which is where the earth that we know of it, but also the other 3 continents where living beings reside. So this earth god, Earth Deva, Earth Spirit, saw what the Buddha was doing, and he quickly spread the news. Maybe that's the Deva equivalent of what we, let me see, what do we use? WhatsApp. We use WhatsApp to spread the news. What else do we use? Twitter. Yeah, maybe Twitter is a more, Twitter and WhatsApp. So he tweeted the Buddha picking up the rag rope. And so what happened is this. It quickly went viral, so all the sky gods heard the voice of the earth god, and they passed on the message to the gods in the heaven of the 4 great kings. Okay, so there, if you remember, there are spirits living in the sky. So we have earthbound spirits, then there are skybound spirits, and these skybound spirits then tweeted the message to the heaven of the 4 great kings. It says, who told the gods in the heaven of the 33. So from the gods of the gods in the heaven of the 4 great kings, then told the heaven above them, the heaven of the 33, where Lord Shakra is. Then they in turn, they tweeted a message to the gods in the heaven free from strife, and from there the message spread to the heaven of joy, the heaven of delighting in emanations, the heaven of making use of others' emanations, and finally all the way to the Brahma realm. That's how viral it became. It went all the way up. So monks at that time, at that moment, at that very instant, this message resounded and traveled all the way to the highest heaven. Okay. That's as viral as you can get. Okay. The Bodhisattva then thought to himself, the Buddha referring to himself, as a mendicant, he said, I have found this dusty rag, so it would be good if I could find some water to wash it with. At that very moment, the gods hit the ground with their hands, and on that spot a lotus spawn appeared. Still to this day, this spawn is known as the pond where the hand struck. That's what the Buddha said. It says, once again, the Bodhisattva thought, now I have obtained water, so it would be good if I could also find a flat stone on which to wash this cloth. At that very moment, Shakra placed such a rock before him, and the Bodhisattva now began to wash the dusty rag. So that's Lord Shakra's role in this. And then Shakra, king of the gods, then spoke to the Bodhisattva, holy man, give the cloth to me, then I will wash it. Then the Buddha said, however, the Bodhisattva wanted to demonstrate the conduct of a renunciant, so he did not give the cloth to Shakra. Instead, he washed it himself. So that's what the soon-to-be Buddha did. So not only did Lord Shakra offer to wash the prince's robes, or soon-to-be robes, because it was still a red cloth, but even before the Buddha was conceived, Lord Shakra was already there. There are stories where in the Tushita heaven, which is the heaven where all future Buddhas, before they get born in Jambudvipa, just like Shakyamuni Buddha, before they're born, they reside in Tushita heaven. And right now, the future Buddha, Maitreya Bodhisattva, is also in the Tushita heaven. So when um, when Shakyamuni Buddha was in the Tushita heaven in his former life, Lord Shakra was already there, encouraging the Buddha to be reborn and to become the Buddha. Okay, and then let me see, when he was born as a prince, and when he wanted to go out to see the city, which is where the prince met the four messages of the sick person, the old person, the dead person, and the mendicant or the monk. Lord Shakra told one of his gods, he says, this will be the last chance for us to dress the prince, because after this he will leave the home life and he will no longer wear fancy clothes. So he dressed not him personally, but he told one of the gods to dress the Buddha for so that when the Buddha went out, he would look really nice, because that was the last time you could dress the Buddha up. When the prince was ready to leave the palace or escape from the palace, it was very hard for him to do so, because his father had built a great big iron gate, a very huge iron gate, and had locked it securely to prevent the prince from escaping. Guess who picked the lock and opened the gate? Lord Shakra. And earlier, I mentioned Sujata, the lady who was preparing rice porridge, and the Buddha the Buddha received the rice porridge. The person who collected the firewood and tended to the fire was apparently Lord Shakra as well. So Lord Shakra has been by the Buddha side for a very long time. Yeah, and not just that. Okay, I have another sutra to share with you. I don't have the precise name of this sutra. I forgot to put it in, but there are various sutras and various commentaries that describe this. So this is the point when the Buddha, this is before the Buddha spoke the Mahaparinibbana Sutta that I shared earlier, and it happens just a few months before the Buddha entered Nirvana. So it says a few months before the Buddha's parinibbana, the Buddha spent the rains retreat near Vasali, where he suffered from dysentery or diarrhea. Shakra became aware of this and thought, my teacher is ill and in need of service. It would be good for me to help him. The king of the gods assumed a human form and came to nurse the Buddha, rubbing his feet and carrying away the vessel containing his excrement without so much as pulling a face. Okay, why does the sutras or the commentaries say Shakra did not pull a face? Okay, let's look at the next slide. The Buddha told Shakra, he said, Shakra, to the devas, the smell of humans from even 100 yojanas away is like having a putrid corpse tied to their necks. You should go away. There are many bhikkhus to act as my nurses. So humans smell to ourselves because we keep ourselves clean. We think we don't really smell. But relative to the gods, humans smell kind of like if you've visited a farm. If you've seen animals, farm animals, you will know that animals really smell, and that's kind of how gods, the devas, perceive humans. No matter how much we try to keep ourselves clean, we just smell. But if you ask an animal if they smell, they say no. I think I'm pretty good. Yeah. So okay, I just got a message saying participants can now see your screen. Was that difficulty in seeing my shared screen earlier? If there is, please let me know. Okay, if what I say does not match up with what's on screen, just let me know. Okay, so coming back to the screen, so the Buddha Though Shakra, he doesn't need to do this because it is taking care of a sick person is unpleasant, but for a god to have to undergo that is a lot more intense. So Shakra replied, he said, Bante, which is how he sometimes addresses the Buddha, says, even standing 84,000 yojanas away, the scent of your virtue can be smelled. I will nurse you. So he insisted. So he said, Shakra cleaned the bodily discharges of the Buddha with his own hand, nor did he turn away his head or make an unpleasant face as if disgusted. Okay. Then, after serving the Buddha's bodily needs for a suitable time, he went back to his own place. The bhikkhus were amazed that the king of the Devas had served the Buddha in this fashion, and remarked at the great affection he must have for his teacher. The Buddha explained the reason for Shakra's devotion was because Shakra, in fear of his imminent death, had come to see him in the Indasala cave, and as a result of hearing the teachings, he attained to stream entry and was instantly reborn as a young Shakra. So this is very interesting because I did some investigation. Okay, so the Buddha explained to the monks. He says, yes, the reason why Shakra is so affectionate to me is not just because he sees the Buddha as a teacher, as his teacher, but there was a point in when Shakra's life was ending, and he came to see the Buddha as because he was afraid, and as a result of the Buddha teaching him, he became a first stage arahant. He became a stream enterer, and upon his death, instantly he was reborn. There was the commentaries don't fully address this, but it seems as if there wasn't any gap between his death and his return. It was like kind of instantaneous. Maybe he took a yawn, he yawned, and when his yawn was over, he was back as the new Shakra, like nothing had happened. Yeah, so because of this, he was very, very grateful to the Buddha. So there's a Dhammapada saying. So the Buddha then pointed out that it is always good to associate with the wise, to be in their presence and learn from the example of their actions, as well as from their verbal teachings. So in the Dhammapada, for those of you who are not familiar with the Dhammapada is a collection of sayings of the Buddha. So the Dhammapada is kind of like certain sutras. The Buddha says a verse or says something noteworthy. What the Dhammapada is a collection of all these noteworthy things. So in the Dhammapada, it is recorded the Buddha saying, a man who keeps company with a fool will suffer for it a long time. It is always painful to live with fools like with an enemy. But a wise man is good to live with, like meeting up with relatives. Therefore, with the intelligent, the wise, the learned, the enduring, the dutiful, and the noble ones, with a man of such virtue and intellect should one associate, as the moon follows the path of stars. So the Dhammapada is excellent. If you want to appear like you're very wise, you can go memorize the Dhammapada. And if you're in a situation where there's a suitable Dhammapada saying, then you can share the verses from the Dhammapada and rely on the Buddha's wisdom. Okay, I actually have the sutra that pinpoints the moment Shakra became a stream enterer, and I'll share with you after the next few slides. I've actually shared the sutra with you before. It's called the Sakapanha or Saka's questions. But at that time, I did not realize the significance or the context of that sutra, so I didn't mention it. But I will after we go through one or two slides more. Okay, another time when the Shakra was by the Buddha's side was at the Buddha's passing, when the Buddha had already entered Nirvana. So the sutra goes like this: says, and when the Blessed One had passed away, simultaneously with his paranibbana, there came a tremendous earthquake, dreadful and astounding, and the thunders rolled across the heavens. Shakra, king of the gods, spoke this stanza. Impermanent are all conditioned things. It is their nature to arise and vanish. Having come into existence, they cease. Good is a peace when they forever cease. So this verse was originally uttered by the Buddha. So like I said, if you want to appear wise, you can memorize the Dhammapada and use it when the occasion arises. So that's kind of what Shakra did. He borrowed the Buddha's verse, and this verse is if there's a funeral and there are Theravada monks, they would usually recite this verse. Impermanent are all conditioned things, to remind everyone that everything is impermanent, including ourselves. And they come and they go. Yeah. Okay. Now it is time to look at the Sakapantha Sutra and see the moment when Shakra became a first stage arhat or stream enterer. At this point, do we have any questions or anything to remark? Okay, I'll wait. I won't wait. You can type it into the chat box. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so this is from 2 weeks ago. If you remember, the part I shared about in this Sakapantha Sutra, Shakra asked the Buddha the question, what are beings bound by? What is it that imprisons us? So his question was that gods and humans, we want happiness, but if you examine our lives, happiness is not a constant. It comes and goes, and and alongside with the happiness, there's equal amount or sometimes even more of suffering. So the Buddha answered, it is because of our jealousy and greed. And so Shakra kept on asking. So for I have summarized the Buddha's answer. So Buddha basically said it is caused by jealousy and greed, and that is caused by the our duality or preference of dividing things into things we like and dislike, which is caused by desire, and desire is caused by thought or thinking, and thinking is caused by behind that thought is false thinking or papancha. And papancha, if you want to know in your thoughts, they're all false thinking because they come from the false mind, but they can still be categorized into useful false thinking that helps us walk the path and useless false thinking. So what is useless false thinking? Well, if your thoughts are based on craving or have thoughts of conceit, meaning you're not true or sincere, or if they're based on a wrong view, that would be true false thinking, false thinking that is not beneficial at all. Yeah. Okay, so Sharon says happiness is an interval between two sorrows. Yeah, or for some people, it's not even true happiness, it's just the absence of discomfort or the absence of sorrow becomes their happiness. Yeah. So instead of true joy, we have a false. As long as we are away from discomfort, it makes us happy already. Yeah. Unfortunately. Okay. So coming back to our sutra. Then Lord Shakra asks another question. So in this sutra, aptly named Sakapantha Sutta, because that means Shakra's question. So he asks a lot of questions from the Buddha. And why? Well, because he knows he's going to die. Oh, sorry, yeah, I forgot. I mentioned that earlier, but I forgot to mention this. So the reason Lord Shakra is answering all these questions is because he realized that he's going to die. And he doesn't have much time left. So when you're face to face with the Buddha and your own mortality, you're not going to ask fun questions. You're going to ask questions that really matter. So the next question Lord Shakra asked was, but how does a mendicant fittingly practice for the cessation of concepts of identity that emerge from the proliferation of perceptions of false thinking? So he gets right to the point. The Buddha has pointed out that false thinking is the root. False thinking here also reflects ignorance. So basically, Lord Shakra's question is, how do you overcome that? How do you overcome false thinking? So the Buddha replies, he says, Lord of gods, there are two kinds of happiness, I say. That which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. There are two kinds of sadness, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. And there are two kinds of equanimity, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. Okay, what does the Buddha mean? He says, why did I say that there are two kinds of happiness? Well, you should know of a happiness. When I cultivate this kind of happiness, unskillful qualities grow and skillful qualities decline. The Buddha said, you should not cultivate that kind of happiness. Okay. Then the Buddha says, whereas, should you know of a happiness, when I cultivate this kind of happiness, unskillful qualities decline and skillful qualities grow. The Buddha said, you should cultivate that kind of happiness. And that which is free of placing the mind and keeping it connected is better than that which involves placing the mind and keeping it connected. That's why I said there are two kinds of happiness. Okay, so the last sentence, the Buddha said, and that which is free of placing the mind and keeping it connected is better than that which involves okay, I think there's a typo here. There should be unconnected. Okay, since I don't have the reference in front of me, maybe for today's discussion, we can discuss the last line. But what I'll do is in the following slides, I will explain everything. Okay, all right. So let's unpack this. The sutra is pretty long, so I have summarized it in a very short form. So basically, the next 2 pages of the sutra has Shakra asking the Buddha various questions. So the Buddha explains it in this way. He says that when it comes to happiness or pleasant feelings, when it comes to sadness or afflictions or unpleasant feelings, when it comes to equanimity, body conduct, verbal conduct, search or the pursuit of goals, and then the Buddha talks about the 6 sense objects, which are sights known by the ear, sounds known by the ear, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts. The Buddha used the explanation he used earlier. He says there are 2 kinds of this list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 plus 6, 12. These 12 items, there are 2 kinds. And so the Buddha explains what are the 2 kinds. For example, when it comes to happiness or pleasant feelings, what is the unwholesome kind? Okay, the unwholesome kind has to do with the last, with 6 to 12, which is anything to do with sights, sounds, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts. So anything to do with the 6 senses that gives you desire, that you want more and more of, is unwholesome. So an example of that would be, say, you smell something and it smells really, really good. Okay, it makes you hungry. And you decide that, oh, that's probably what you want to have for lunch or dinner. That's unwholesome. Okay, you eat something. Okay, so you smell something really nice. You find out what it is, and then you end up eating it. And after the first bite, you say, "Oh, this is really, really good. I want more." And you eat and eat and eat until you become too full. That kind of desire, the Buddha says, is unwholesome. And it makes you want more. Then you say, oh, I'm going to have this again, maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, you know. So anything to do with the 6 senses that makes you want to desire more of it, to enjoy more of it, the Buddha says that's unwholesome. So what is wholesome? Okay, wholesome, the Buddha explains, is associated with 4 categories. One is it makes you detached. So instead of being more attached, it makes you less attached. The second, uh, what would I use? The second, um, okay, the second category is it makes you want to practice meditation. Oh, sorry. The second category is the joy that arises when you practice meditation. So when you practice meditation, Shufu describes it really well. He says after a while you feel really comfortable. It's not the dhyana yet. You haven't entered the dhyana or the jhanas yet, but the physically you feel really relaxed and comfortable. So that's and it brings you a certain sense of joy, a certain sense of happiness. Buddha says that is wholesome. Okay, so that's the second one. And then the third one is when you contemplate the Buddha, which is one of the Pure Land practices. When you contemplate the Buddha and it gives you a lot of joy, the Buddha says that's a wholesome practice. So when we are mindful of the Buddha, when we recite the Buddha's name, it should bring us joy, and that is wholesome. In fact, just that alone, just being mindful of the Buddha is enough to actually end birth and death. Um, there are several sutras that describe that, but we won't go into that today. I just wanted to emphasize the importance of joy in recollecting the Buddha or mindfulness of the Buddha. And number 4, the last one, is the joy resulting from absorption in the dhyanas. So, say if you recite the Buddha's name, and like the Amitabha Sutra, it says for whether for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, 6 or 7 days with one mind or one heart unconfused. That is to describe that as the first dhyana wouldn't be wrong. So the Buddha says the joy resulting from that, and Shofu says that the joy of the first dhyana is nothing like anything on earth at all. Is outside of our usual experience. The Buddha says these 4 kinds, that's wholesome. So there's happiness that comes in 2 forms. If the happiness is derived from the senses and it makes you want more of it, the Buddha says that's unwholesome. Be careful. Watch out for yourself. Watch over your mind carefully. But the other form of happiness, which is wholesome, that leads to renunciation, because if things are impermanent, you keep on seeing something, but it's impermanent, or someone gives you something, it's going to, someone gives you a phone, okay, the latest, whatever it is right now, is it the iPhone 13 or the 14 or whatever it is, 15, someone gives you a phone, usually it makes a lot of people happy. But if you know that, oh, there's something wrong with this phone, it will work for maybe an hour, but by tomorrow, it's going to break down and it's going to become useless. Your happiness won't be the same. So you don't get attached to that new toy that you have. So that's renunciation. It leads to renunciation or lack of attachment of worldly affairs. So that plus the joy associated with insight practice, when you meditate and you get better and better, you feel a certain kind of happiness. Number 3, when you recollect, when you have when you're mindful of the Buddha, the joy that accompanies that mindfulness. And number 4, you do all the first 3 very well and you enter dhyana. The Buddha says that's wholesome happiness. Yeah, um, you want to develop that. Okay, coming to the second one, which is sadness or unpleasant feelings. What are unwholesome about unpleasant feelings? Well, there are, again, is associated with the 6 senses. And an example of this would be, say, you lose something that's important to you, either people, you lose someone you care for, you lose property. Right now, there's a lot of natural disasters going on, and a lot of people lose everything they own, washed away by floods or burned by fires. You may have had great plans of success for yourself, but right now in your life you don't have those, so a lack of success. All these things like that um, tends to make one distracted. It tends to push one. So instead of dealing with the how you say, instead of helping us deal with the issues, it pushes someone to seek comfort instead. So discomfort pushes us to seek comfort. And what all these things does is it brings unwholesome thoughts. And unwholesome thoughts makes things worse. For example, this may not be a great example, but this is what just came to my mind. Sometimes at funerals, people become really is things become really difficult for people at funerals, and instead of coping, uh, the emotions, the strong emotions that they have, seems to make things worse. So instead of being able to cope, it becomes more difficult for them to cope. So that's what stress, affliction, or discomfort, sadness, unpleasant feelings do to us. So another example would be like, someone thinks they have won the lottery, and that starts off a whole chain of uninterrupted false thinking about what they're going to do with the money and the things that they can plan, etc., until they find out that, oh, it was an error. Either the lottery company made an error or they made an error, and in the end, they didn't win anything at all. So this affliction causes um, the loss of something which you then want, or you remember something and you wish for something either you have had before or you've never had, but the opportunity to have is lost, and it causes you affliction. So these are examples of why sadness or unpleasant feelings can be unwholesome. So as long as it originates in sensual desire or worldly affairs, or it comes from our six senses, we should be very mindful of ourselves. Okay, what is wholesome unpleasant feelings? So sadness or unpleasant feelings can be wholesome as well. Okay, but what it is? Okay, if you are sad, okay, so it still involves sadness. If you are sad that you have recited the Buddha's name for a very long time and you still haven't had any sign that you're going to the Pure Land, that is good. So anything that has to do with wanting to be, anything that has to do with walking the path, a longing for release or a longing for enlightenment, like you want to end suffering or birth and death, because we realize that everything is inconstant or impermanent. Things come and go. Your new phone doesn't really bring you satisfaction for very long because a new model will be released in a few months or in a year, and then you want the new thing again, and you want to be free of all this. You realize that human life is, or not human life, samsaric life, can be very dangerous if you fall, and you want to be free of all these perils of existence, and you practice and you wonder why you haven't seen any um, fruits yet, and you're sad. Okay, you're sad you haven't seen any fruits yet. The Buddha said that is wholesome, because why? That spurs you on to um, to 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 practice harder. Yeah. So there's actually a story here. Since we only have 5 minutes left, I'll share this story because there's a lot more that we can cover. Maybe we'll do that for next week. Yeah. Wait, let me see. You know what? No, I'll keep the story maybe for next week, and we'll use the remaining time to finish this. Okay. Um, oh, wait, let me see. No, there's a lot more to cover. Yeah, 6 minutes will not do it justice. So I'll tell the story instead. I'm sorry for flip flopping, but I'll tell the story instead. Okay, so the story is about this monk, and um, this monk had a lot of students, and some of his students were arhats, but this monk wasn't an arhat at all. So one of his students decided to help his master by telling the master that the master should also pay attention to himself, so that he can practice meditation and end birth and death. Then the master explained that he's too busy answering questions from his students that he doesn't have time. And then the student said, okay, in that case, I won't ask you any questions so that you have time to meditate. Then the master realized what his student was doing. So his student became his teacher instead. And so he went to the forest and he put down everything and he went to the forest and meditated. And he meditated and meditated for a very long time. The commentary says he meditated for a few years. And when he meditated and still did not achieve his goal, he became really sad. Okay, so he became really sad that he hadn't ended birth and death. And he had all these students who were arhats, but he himself had no attainment yet. So he started to cry. He was so sad, he started to cry. And then he heard another person crying. And when he looked around, he saw that there was a spirit around, I think I don't remember whether it was a heavenly spirit or a earth spirit, but it was a deva. Okay, and the deva was crying next to him, and this kind of made him startled. And he asked the deva, I said, "Why are you crying?" And the deva said, "Well, you're a monk. Obviously, you know how to end birth and death, and you are crying. So I'm just following your example, crying to find a way out of suffering." So what this deva was doing was not making fun of him or not being ignorant, but just to show the monk how silly he was. Yeah. So not all kinds of sadness, just because you want to end birth and death and you become sad and you cry, means it's wholesome. Okay. If you take that sadness and you become more vigorous, if you channel that energy in a wise way, which was what the deva was trying to teach this monk. So what the monk did was he said, "Oh, I understand now." So he renewed his vigor, and in the end, he became an arhat, thanks to the efforts of his teachers. And so that's a case where sadness can be wholesome. Okay, when you're sad, you haven't achieved your goals yet, then and you put it to proper use. Okay, you put the energy to proper use, then it's wholesome. Okay, Sarah says, how can we start meditating? Can we start with 5 minutes? I find with meditation, my mind wanders around a lot. Yes, you start with whatever time you have. People, first of all, there's a misconception that meditation is only when you sit. Like it's a very formal practice. It's only when you sit that you meditate. But meditation actually means being mindful of what's going on in your mind. So, okay, but having said that, okay, yes, Saha, if you want to you want to practice meditation, of course you have to sit. And first, you start with whatever time you have. But you have to be, if you're serious, then you have to be disciplined. And you have to allocate time out of your schedule. You have to create time if you're serious. But if you're not serious, then, it becomes, everything else is more important and you end up having no time. Or even if you do it, it's you not regret doing it. You do it knowingly that you have more important things to do. And it's like you're doing someone a favor by sitting down and meditating. That it shouldn't be that way. Okay. So if someone is sincere, they naturally make time because it's important, and they make time and you sit down and you recite, or you observe your breathing. There are many, many ways. Or you recite the Buddha's name. So if you recite the Buddha's name, then reciting the Buddha's name becomes the mirror where you find your mind wandering. So a wandering mind, when you meditate, is normal, because that's the false thinking mind. That's the nature of the mind. The nature of the false thinking mind is that it wanders, which is why You have a Dharma door, you have a Dharma practice that acts as a mirror to reflect the moments when your mind wanders. So you catch it and then you bring it back. So when your mind wanders, as you're reciting, say the Buddha's name, you catch it, you become aware of it. The moment you become aware, you don't follow after that train of thoughts anymore. You stop it, no matter what it is, and then you bring it back to recitation of the Buddha's name. And the more you do it, then the more skillful you become. But at the same time, meditation starts from precepts. I have a saying that when you sit to meditate, the foundation that you sit on comes from precepts. And what are precepts meant to do? One of it is to help you lessen your attachments. Because if you have very, very strong attachments, if you regard everything as real, the Sixth Petrarch says that regard everything as not real, as an illusion. But if you take things to be real, everything is very, very important. Everything defines who you are, for example, and we create very strong attachments, then that creates obstacles when we try to practice, for example, in our meditation. So for those of you who want to practice meditation, yes, there is a form to the practice where you sit and you gather your mind and you keep on pulling your mind back. But at the same time, there's also the other side where you have to examine how you use the precepts in your everyday life. Is it wholesome or unwholesome? So using the Buddha's principle of there are two kinds. So using the precepts can lead to unwholesome tendencies if you don't understand the spirit of the precepts. But there's a wholesome side to the precepts where it reduces your attachments to everyday things in life. And that part is the one that helps you in your meditation. All right. Okay. Any more questions? No. If not, then let's dedicate merit. But I have to find the slides first. Oh, where are my slides? Let me end this slideshow. Oh. I just lost my PowerPoint just crashed on me. Okay, I got it back. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, dedication of merit. May every excuse me. May every living being our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Okay, let's do 3 bows to the Buddha, to Shufu. Okay, first bow. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Bowing respect to the Venerable Master. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. All right, everyone, we'll see you next week. Amitofo.